So hello everyone and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think we'll be waiting a little bit for some folks to hop on for our webinar. And then I'm excited to be talking with Devin here from Keep Pinellas Beautiful. We'll be talking about plastic pollution and some things you can do about it, and about microplastics as well. Make sure to put any questions you have throughout the event down below in the Q&A chat box, and we'll be sure to answer them after the event. Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. So as I said, this is our Hope Learning Youth webinar, and we do these series every month and with a new guest speaker and a new topic with environmental issues and hope spot protectors in our local community. So thank you so much for logging on and joining us today. As I said, we have Devin Frank from Keep Pinellas Beautiful, and I'm so excited to be learning more about plastic pollution because it is a big problem in our area and a lot of areas too. So yes.
Awesome. Yes, no, you hit the nail right on the head with that. And you're going to get a sense of just how big this problem is as I share my presentation with you guys. So let's see. Let me get my PowerPoint launched here. Let's see. Can you guys see? Let's see. As I start this here. You see the actual presentation itself. You don't see like the notes. Is that right?
We do see the notes as well.
Oh, you see the notes version. Interesting. Let's stop share then. Let's see. Share PowerPoint slideshow. No, that's what well, hang on. Maybe that's it. Let's try that one. How's that?
Yep, there we go.
Okay, there we go. And
great.
Let me make sure that I share sound because I do have some videos and noises in here. So I think that should do the trick. Awesome. Okay, so here we go. Perfect, perfect. Well, yes, this is one of my sadly most favorite topics to present on. I don't know if that's the right thing to say. It's an interesting one for sure. And definitely something that is a big issue and something that we can definitely all do something about. So without further ado, this is, I'll start with just a quick introduction of me and the organization I work for, but then we'll jump right in and get started with a macro look at microplastics. So who are we? Well, we are Keep Pinellas Beautiful. And basically, our mission is to conserve and beautify our natural environment by means of community engagement and education. So our three big words are educate, engage, and empower. Those are the three big things we try to do. So educating people, they may not know why one person's litter is an issue. They may not understand why native plants are helpful and invasive plants can be bad and things like that. So we'll teach in a number of different ways. But then beyond that, we want to actually engage people in activities too. So whether that's doing beach cleanups or community cleanups or planting native plants, removing invasive plants, gardening projects, we want to actually get people's hands literally and physically and metaphorically or whatever you want to call it dirty. Because that way people start to get a sense of empowerment. They feel like they're making a difference because they are by doing these things. And suddenly they start making small little environmental choices and changes just in their everyday life. And we live in a cleaner and greener society. And that's really what we're all about. I like to say that Keep Pinellas Beautiful, we're sort of like glorified cheerleaders. Like our job is to sort of inspire all of you guys to hopefully want to do more to help keep the environment clean and healthy. So we focus on four main areas. Clearly, the environment is a huge topic, and we can't cover everything. But the four main topics we talk about are litter prevention, waste reduction, conservation, and beautification and community greening. So yeah, I mean, these are four very broad topics, which is great because then we can cover a lot of things within them. And you can even see how they kind of overlap. And one of the things that I like most about this topic of plastic and microplastics is that it fits into all four categories, which is really kind of cool. So this kind of covers things that we do all across the board. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump right into the topic. So, and this is going to be the test to see if the sound works. What is one of the world's biggest environmental issues these days? Well, I mean, there's a lot of them, but a big one we deal with is trash. Did the sound work there? I'm just curious.
Yes.
It did. Good. Okay. Perfect. Yes. is trash. Yeah, I mean, we make a lot of trash. Basically, the average person in America, I think, makes 3 to 4 pounds a day. The average person in Pinellas County makes nearly double that, or over double that, more than 8 pounds a day of trash. So a lot of trash we make. And if we don't dispose of that trash properly, it becomes litter. So litter is waste out of place. Basically, when it's put where it doesn't belong. And the question is, why? Why do people litter? I mean, there's a lot of reasons. There's intentional littering and unintentional littering. So unintentional is by accident. Things happen, and we're all, it happens even to the best of us, that, we throw something out, but then the garbage can falls over and stuff falls out. Maybe raccoons or whatever get into it. Things might fly out of your car without you knowing. These things happen. It's the intentional littering that we can really make conscious choices and do something different about. So people might litter because they're, number one answer people usually say is because they're lazy. And they just, I see the garbage can is way over there. I'm not going to go walk all the way over there, and so they'll just put their stuff down. Or maybe they don't know, they don't understand that one person's litter actually can cause negative impacts. Maybe they just don't care. There are some people who just don't care. Maybe they want to throw things out, but there just isn't the waste system in place. There just aren't garbage cans nearby. So there's a lot of reasons why people litter. But it's really up to all of us to try to avoid that and do what we can to make sure that we're not littering, because that is the number one solution we can do to everything I'm about to talk to today. So the question is, when people litter, does that litter just stay on the ground, or does it move somewhere? Well, the answer is it doesn't just stay in the same place all the time. The wind, the rain, all that kind of stuff is going to push all your litter basically through your watershed, and where we live, it's going to go to the ocean. And honestly, like, even if you live really far inland, it makes its way all the way down to the streams, to the rivers, and will eventually make its way out to the ocean. And when it becomes in the ocean, that's when that litter is called marine debris. So what is marine debris? Well, the very technical definition of marine debris is that it is any persistent solid material that is manufactured or processed and directly or indirectly, intentionally or unintentionally disposed of or abandoned into the marine environment or Great Lakes. So basically, summarizing that up, it basically means if it's a man-made object and it ends up in the ocean or the Great Lakes, it's marine debris. So what can be marine debris? Well, literally anything made by people. From a shopping cart to, of course, plastic, which is what we're talking about today, to, I mean, you name it. And it can be, a wall. If a wall falls off a building and ends up in the ocean, that's marine debris. There's anything that is made by people that gets in the ocean can be marine debris. Some of the more common kinds, for sure, what we think of are plastics, but then, I mean, like fishing boats, derelict fishing gear that's just gotten lost, all of that becomes marine debris if it's not taken care of. But the biggest problem today is single-use plastic. So not just plastic in general, but single-use plastic. And those are plastics that are designed to be used one time and then thrown out. Things like water bottles and plastic bags and straws and silverware. And I mean, the list goes on and on. These are all things that are designed to be used one time and thrown out. And that really is the big problem. And what's crazy is that this plastic makes up somewhere between 0.5% to 95% of all marine debris today. And it's like I said, it's crazy because what this graph shows is that like the mass production of plastic really only started in like 1950. So it's only been around for 70 years, and it makes up so much of our marine debris that we have. And it's just continuing. We're making more and more, just continuing to make more and more of this kind of stuff. So let's just really briefly go over a little bit of the history of plastic in our oceans. See if this video works.
I just want to say one word to you. Just one word.
Yes, sir.
Are you listening?
Yes, I am.
Plastics.
Exactly how do you mean?
There's a great future in plastics. Think about it. Will you think about it?
Yes, I will.
Enough said. That's a deal.
So I'm guessing that most of you probably have not seen this movie. It is a classic. The movie is called The Graduate. It came out in 1967. That's a very young Dustin Hoffman, which you may not even know who he is either. And that's okay. But the whole point of this is that this is a character who just graduated from college and he's trying to figure out what to do with his life. And this neighborly figure comes to him and says, plastics, you should work in plastics. Because at the time, it was a huge booming industry in the 50s and the 60s. And it's, this is what people needed. Like, don't get me wrong, plastics are amazing. Like for what they do, they preserve our food. They're used in medical equipment. They're, help me see, there's plastic in my glasses. Like, there's so much amazing stuff that plastic does. But the problem was that the single-use plastics were starting to be made, and they weren't thinking about the end life of the product of plastic. What happens when we're done with the plastic? What do we do then? So those were kind of the issues that were coming out. And as basically we started to move along this path, so 1950, already 2 million tons of plastics have been produced by the mass producing companies. Watch the little water bottle move ahead in time there. 1960, seabirds, the first time that seabirds were being recorded interacting with plastic in a negative way was all the way back just 10 years really after mass production started. In 1972 was really like the first time that someone wrote about small pieces of floating plastics. So kind of keep that one in your head. They weren't called microplastics yet, but this was sort of the precursor to that idea being talked about. 1987 is when scientists really started to kind of dive into like how much plastic is in our oceans, and they started doing net tow studies. So basically that's a net tow. That's a picture of one right there, and it attaches to the back of a boat. And as the boat just drives along, everything that is in front of that net gets caught in that net. And it usually is used to capture plankton, which are like little itty bitty tiny animals in the water, to study those. But they were using them instead to start studying plastic in the water. And so they would go in straight lines for a certain amount of distance and then take everything out of the net and look what they got. And they could sort of get an idea of how much plastic was in the ocean in different places. And this actually helped lead to this discovery of this garbage patch in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. You might have heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It's not the only one. There's one in the middle of every single ocean. This is just the biggest one. And a lot of people think of this as an island that you can walk on that's made of garbage. It's not an island. It's more of a soup. And even that is sort of a stretch of a word. There's just more plastic that's sort of congregated in this area than in other places. So, and a lot of it is the small pieces that you can't really see very well because they are so small. But since it's so like concentrated, people call it a patch, but then it gets this idea that you can walk on it, but you definitely can't. Moving even further ahead, 2010 now. We're at the point now with all that plastic in the ocean. There's at least 100 million metric tons of plastic in our oceans just within 50 kilometers of the coasts. If you wanted to count all that, just 1 pound of that per second, it would take you 19,216 years just to count that. And yeah, wow, that's a lot. Another way to look at this, that is the same weight as 302 Empire State Buildings. If you stack those end to end, they would stretch from Tampa to Orlando. That's how much plastic is just within 50 kilometers of the oceans, of the coasts in 2010. Now, what's interesting too is to look at this image as well. So this is looking at all of the data that was collected by those nets, those net tows, showing how much concentration of plastics they were finding. So the red colors mean really heavy concentration. The blue colors mean less concentration. And I always like to ask the question, what is the most prominent color you see in all three of these maps? And usually people will say, well, it's blue, or maybe sometimes let's say, well, in the bottom right one, that's red. But the most prominent color is white. And what that white is there areas that haven't been studied yet. There's a lot of our ocean that we just still don't know about. And, this is 2010. So this is, 10, 13 years ago now at this point. And sure, there's been more studied since then, but it just goes to show you how new of a science this really is, looking at plastic in our waterways and what we're learning about them. So let's keep moving further ahead. 2015. We're now at the point that the average American is basically using 306.4 pounds of plastic per year. That's a lot. That's about the same weight as the heaviest players in the NFL. That's a lot of plastic. Also at that point where the estimate is that just in the United States, we're using 50 million single-use water bottles every single day. That's enough to stretch from Los Angeles to Beijing every single day, just in the United States. That is a lot of single-use water bottles that we're using. So what about today? Let's jump forward today. How much plastic is in our ocean? Well, the answer is we really don't know exactly. But we have a really good idea of how much there is based on the amount that is littered versus what is recycled versus what is reused versus what ends up in landfills versus, versus what's produced. We can get really good estimates. What we do know is that it is in every single ocean. It's been found in every ocean. And based on what we know, and we have really good ideas of how much is out there right now, 95% of basically like what we know is out there, we can't find. So the question is, where is it? Where is it? Well, I mean, it could be so many places. Maybe it's not just floating at the surface of the ocean. I mean, we've already seen there's so much of the ocean we still have yet to study. It could be in the middle of the ocean. It could like the water level. It could be at the bottom of the ocean. It could be washed up on our shorelines. It could be broken up into small little pieces, which hint, hint, clue, clue is where a lot of it is. Maybe it's inside animals too. There's a lot of different places that this could be. But we're at the point where the average amount of plastic that's going into our ocean every single year is about 8 million metric tons, which is a big number, but it's hard to imagine what that actually is. Basically, that's about the same weight as 1.5 trillion grocery bags. So it's not all grocery bags, but imagine that it was. If it was grocery bags, that would be enough grocery bags to stack end to end, would stretch from the earth to the sun 65 times. That's the average amount of plastic we're putting into the ocean each year. But so that's 8 million metric tons. What about the year 2020? I just recently found that it was up to 35 million metric tons that went into the ocean just in 2020. So this is like, all right, I got to figure out, how do I make this relatable? Well, 35 million metric tons, that's the same weight as 87.5 trillion straws. Yeah, that's a huge number. Like, again, just to put it into something relatable to make it straws. But again, 87.5 trillion, I have no idea what that looks like. So let's keep trying to make this somewhat imaginable. All right, so if you stretch those end to end, that reaches 11.74 billion miles. Okay, can I imagine how far that is? No, I really can't. So I started Googling distances between things to figure out, how can I make this relatable? Well, unfortunately, the distances ended up, I had to start looking at distances between objects in our solar system to figure out how far this is. And essentially, well, from the sun to Pluto is 3.7 billion miles. So in just the year 2020, we put the same amount of plastic into our oceans that would stretch from the sun to Pluto 3.25 times in straws. That's how much went into our ocean just in 2020. So the question is this an issue? Yeah, it's a big issue. Just in case you're wondering too, traveling at the speed of light, that would take you 17.4 hours to travel that far, which is pretty far. And the scary thing is that if we keep going at this rate, by the year 2050, there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than all fish combined. It's just, there's something we got to make a change. Definitely have to make a change. And we'll talk about what we can do. So how does this plastic get in the ocean? Does it just fall off of boats? Not so much. Honestly, about 80% of all the marine debris in the ocean comes from land. It washes off the watersheds and ends up in the ocean. And basically that's going to happen if it's not collected by street sweepers, if it's not caught in storm drains, which can cause them to flood, or if we don't pick it up with a beach cleanup. Those are sort of our last ditch efforts to get it before it ends up in the ocean. And basically, this isn't an issue just here. This is an issue all over the world. And let's take a look and kind of see what's happening at a place, well, far from here in India.
The exact problem of plastic in ocean is this. Now you come to the plastic graveyard here in the ocean.
The washed-up remains of a throwaway society.
Now you see the enormity of the problem.
This isn't litter that's been dropped on the beach. It's come in from the sea, recklessly thrown away, distributed on the currents, and then swept ashore.
This is the most dangerous, the blue one. It's a single-use plastic. And this, if it gets down, you had it. This is all in the mall. This is from the mall.
From the shopping mall.
Shopping mall. This is so prevalent in Indian shopping mall.
Afros inspired the world's biggest ever beach clean. Once a week, volunteers clear what they can, knowing full well that the next tide will lay a new carpet of plastic.
So the ocean throws it up. Ocean pukes out every 2 months, 3 months, And if you don't clean it, it will get piled on, piled on, piled on. It's just not convenient for the fishes and the marine creatures and marine birds, It's their house. It's there where they belong. They live, they survive. They're crying for justice because we have messed up with their houses.
Worldwide, the equivalent of one rubbish truck of plastic waste is being dumped into the ocean every minute. By 2050, the trash in the sea is likely to weigh more than all of the fish. This is the debris of modern life, almost all of it single-use plastic. A bag used for a few minutes to take the shopping home, a straw used for seconds to drink some juice, and thrown away with little regard for what happened to it, and now being brought back in on the tide.
So yeah, a lot of it's single-use plastic, which is the issue. So why is this a problem? Well, when this plastic gets in the ocean, it travels quickly. It doesn't just stay in the place where it was. It can move all over the place and cause problems elsewhere. It can destroy habitats. It can smother seagrass beds or coral beds. It transports invasive species, species that aren't supposed to be in an area, and then can disrupt the ecosystem elsewhere. When it piles up, it costs a lot of money to do those cleanups and to remove all of that plastic when that happens. It can cause navigation and safety hazards for all that stuff being in the water. We live in Florida. We need tourism here. People come to Florida because they want to go to the beach. And studies actually show that if you've got litter on your beach, people don't come. And so it's really important for us, for our economy, not to have litter on our beaches. And also, when it piles up, you don't want that to happen. You want to prevent that from happening. So that costs extra too. So if it piles up, you got to remove it, and it costs money to not have that happen. So it's a huge expenditure for sure. And of course, this hurts animals with all the plastic in the water. As of just a few years ago, there were at least 690 marine species documented interacting with plastic in a negative way. I like to point out the seabirds. At least 80 species of those 690 are seabirds. But what's crazy is that within those 80 species, 90% of every single individual bird has been interacting with plastic in a negative way. It's just crazy, like how disruptive and bad this stuff is for animal life. But one of the things about plastic that makes it different than others is that it doesn't go away. It just breaks down into smaller pieces. So we're kind of transitioning into our microplastics talk here. So what happens, and I'll save that for the next slide because I've got that on there. But basically, it breaks into smaller pieces, and it just eventually it's gone, with very heavy quotes around gone, because the plastic doesn't ever actually go away. It just gets so small you can't see it anymore. So how long does it take for some of these animals, for some of these plastics to get so small that you can't see them? Well, first, let's look at cardboard box and apple core. Clearly not plastic, made from more organic materials. These actually will decompose. And these take about 2 to 3 months or so for these to like literally be gone from our environment. But when you start getting plastics in, like a cigarette butt, about 1 to 5 years is how long that takes until you just can't see it anymore. And yes, they do have plastic in them. So cigarette butts are a single-use plastic. Plastic bag, something you use for just 20, 30 minutes to bring your groceries home, takes 10 to 20 years for it to break down into microplastics. Plastic beverage holder and styrofoam cup, 50 years. A plastic bottle, something you use, for, your lunch to drink your drink and then you're done with it, 450 years until it breaks down into microplastics. And fishing line, 600 years. It's a long time. These impact our environment for a long time when they break down into microplastics. So what are microplastics? Well, micro means small and plastics means, plastics. They are smaller than 5 millimeters in definition. It's a really new science. It's really the last 20 years or so that this has really kind of been prominently studied. So there's still a lot we don't know. There's 2 different types. So we have primary microplastics, which are like nurdles, one of my favorite words to say, and microbeads, like little tiny pellets, basically, that are made by the plastic companies. They melt them down and can shape them into other products, basically, like bags or bottles, whatever it is. What we're probably more familiar with when it comes to microplastics are secondary microplastics. These are items like big plastic items that get into the ocean and then break down over time into tiny, tiny pieces. That's probably what we're more familiar with. So how does this process work? Well, basically, when you have your plastic and you add in sunlight, those UV rays, some wind and waves and currents, it just batters that plastic, makes it really fragile and brittle, and it just keeps breaking into smaller pieces. And that's kind of how that process works. There's still a lot we don't know about this process because it is still so newly studied. But we do know that the longer the plastic is out there, the more risks because it breaks down into more and more pieces. And we do know that it is found everywhere. So where are they found? Well, they're found at the surface of all oceans all over the planet. They're found washed up on beaches all over the planet. They've even been found in samples of Arctic ice. They've been found at the deepest parts of the deepest part of the ocean, the bottom of the Marianas Trench. They've been found all the way down there too. And it's not just our oceans. They're found in freshwater systems, lakes, rivers, streams, all over the world. The pieces are so small, they literally float in the air. They're in the air. We're breathing them right now. It's in our freshwater. It's in our tap water. It's in our bottled water. It's in everything we drink. The estimate right now is that there's about 35 trillion pieces just floating at the surface of the waters of the ocean, let alone everywhere else that they are. That's about 150 times the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy, just floating at the oceans. That's the average estimate. So there's a lot out there, absolutely. And a lot of it you just can't see because it's so small. So why are microplastics especially bad? Well, that's the smallest animals that are getting affected now too, because now they're eating the smallest pieces too. These small plastics have this nickname being a cocktail of chemical contaminants. Basically, the plastic itself has chemicals in it, but the small pieces attract lots of chemicals in the water that don't want to be in the water. They want to stick to something. And so they stick to the surface of these small pieces of plastic, and then they get ingested by the animals. And when that happens, studies are starting to show that these marine animals, they're wasting energy. They're trying to digest this stuff and they can't do it. And when that happens, they can't migrate as far. Migrations aren't able to last as long. Animals that eat microplastics are growing slower. They're getting sick. A lot of these animals are getting tumors. They're having fewer babies and less healthy babies. And generally what's happening is populations in the ocean are just decreasing in size and they're less healthy because of all the plastic that's out there. That's just generally what's happening. So what about us? We eat the animals that eat the microplastics. So there's at least 49 commercial species we know of that are eating plastic that we eat. So are we ingesting plastic? Well, there was a fecal study. Yes, a study of people's poop that was done a few years back, looking at people's poop from all over the world, looking at from the US, from the Netherlands, from Japan, from all over the place. And what they found is that in their study, 100% of people had samples of microplastics in their poop. So yes, we are all eating microplastics and it is passing through our bodies all the time. The estimate actually is that the average American is eating about a credit card worth of plastic every week. So I know I don't like sprinkling a credit card on my salads and things like that, but it's just in everything. It's in everything we eat and drink. And the issue, which we don't know the answer to yet, is this question about biomagnification. And what that is that basically contaminant levels of different toxins and things affect each level of the food chain more and more the higher you go. And where are people? We're at the top of the food chain. So these animals that are eating the same toxins that are getting them sick, are they affecting us in even worse ways? We just don't know yet. It's just, this is still too new of a study and we don't know. So now that you guys are all sufficiently crying and feeling hopeless, I do want to let you know that it's not too late. It isn't. There is still so much that we can do to make a difference with this problem. So what is Keep Pinellas Beautiful doing? Well, we actually have a microplastics program where we actually have ambassadors, volunteer leaders who go out into the community, collect water samples, and we analyze them at our lab here in the office, just for the purpose of educating the public. What are we finding in our own waterways with plastics and microplastics, which is really important. We've got a video series that we share with the public. We do these kinds of talks as well. We have handouts that we give to people. We attend outreach events. We have labs that are getting set up in high schools around the county to get high school students involved. We create worksheets and curriculums and all those sorts of things. But it's not just us. You guys can make a difference too. But you might be thinking, wait, I'm just one person. And if well, it's actually now 8 billion people on the planet. If they all said this, we wouldn't get anywhere. I mean, this is a super cheesy thing to say, but it's true. It's really up to all of us working together to make a difference. We all have to do our own small part. If we all do our own little part, it will make a huge difference in the long run of taking care of our environment. And the first thing you can do, I like to use this analogy to sort of wrap things up. You can help. What can you do? Pretend when this is all over, this webinar, you go to your kitchen and you see that the sink has been left on. The sink is clogged. Water is all over the place. It's all over the floor. What's the first thing you're going to do? Is it going to be grab mops and towels and start wiping everything up? Or is it going to be to turn the faucet off? It's probably going to turn the faucet off. Grabbing those mops and towels helps. It does, because you're wiping up the mess where that water is. But is the water just going to come right back? It is, yeah. So what we have to do is the same thing. We have to prevent plastic from flowing into the ocean in the first place. The cleanups help. They absolutely do, because we're removing the stuff that is harming the environment, the economy, and the animals and us, but it's just going to keep coming back. So the ultimate solution is to stop it in the first place. So what can we do? You guys have probably heard of reduce, reuse, recycle before. It's expanded a little bit. It's not just those three anymore. It's now like a whole waste reduction pyramid. So what do all these words mean? Well, let's start at the top. Rethink. So I like to use this then in terms of single-use plastics. If you're about to use single-use plastic, the first thing you can do is think, what else could I use instead? What else could I do instead? And you can basically run through all the other R words on this pyramid to figure out what can you do instead. So that's always the first thing. You could choose to refuse. You can refuse to use single-use plastics. Choose things that are just more environmentally friendly. You can skip the straw. Literally something as simple as just choosing to drink out of the cup rather than using a straw could potentially save a sea turtle's life. It's that simple, just making those tiny little choices and changes. Reduce. You can reduce the amount of single-use plastic you use. If you can't refuse it, just try to use less, and then go back up to rethink. What can I do next time? What can I do next time so that I'm not using it again? You can reuse things. Even some single-use plastics you can clean and use again. But otherwise, try to use reusable water bottles, reusable bags, all that kind of stuff. One of my favorite words is repurpose. What that means is after you use an item, you can literally change its purpose for something else. Turn it into art. Turn a milk jug into a bottle, into a vase, or into a birdhouse or something like that. Repair. You can fix your stuff, rather than just throwing it out. Recycle. Absolutely. Just make sure that you throw it into the right bins and you do. It can be hard to do properly, but if done right, it's great. But you'll notice, is recycle at the top of the list? No, it's actually pretty close to the bottom. And it's for a reason. You really want to focus on the other R words first. So you can help. We actually have a plastic-free pledge that you can go to the website on the screen there, basically tinyurl.com/KPB plastic-free pledge. And you get to pick and choose which of those 10 things you think you can do to help make a difference. Maybe you can do all 10, maybe you can just do a couple. But this way you're sort of saying, hey, I pledge, I can do these things to help keep my environment clean of single-use plastics. Otherwise, you can always join us, volunteer with us. We do cleanups all the time. If you want to be an ambassador, just need to be a high school student or an adult in the community. We can actually teach you to help run some of our programs. It's a great leadership opportunity, great for resumes. Just tell us about the needs in your community. We'd love to work with you and set up events to help your community be more clean and green. And a super important thing is teach others. If people don't know, then they're not going to do anything. The first step, remember, is educate, engage, empower. That first step is education. And then after that, we can actually start to all do something together about it. And that's it, you guys. Any questions or anything?
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Devin, for talking with us and sharing your presentation. And yeah, anyone watching at home, please feel free to ask some questions. I have a few while we're waiting for you, Devin.
Do you want me to leave this up, or should I close off the share? What would you like?
Either way.
Okay, I'll leave it up for another minute and then I'll close it down just in case anybody's writing stuff down. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm ready.
All right. So let's see. So I was wondering, after you were talking about microplastics and how there's so much already in the ocean, is there new technologies now that are helping clean up those microplastics or no?
That's a good question. That's a good question. It's a very difficult task. People are trying for sure. And we live in a cool day and age, honestly, where these types of technologies, people are thinking about it. 15, 20 years ago, this was not even a thing that was on people's minds. The people are trying to come up with solutions. One of the coolest ones that I've heard about right now is that there are some universities that are trying to design bacteria that will eat plastic. And that's the reason why it doesn't decompose, is because for something to decompose, there have to be bacteria or microbes that eat it. And there are no existing in the natural world bacteria or microbes that eat plastic. So that's why it just breaks into smaller pieces and it never goes away. So if they can get this bacteria to do what it's supposed to do, then maybe we can actually, do something about it. But there's a lot of testing that still needs to be done, because you don't just want to create bacteria and then release it into the wild. I feel like that's the start of like every horror movie that's ever been made. You definitely got to test it first to make sure. So this is just one example of, things that people are trying to come up with. I've also heard of like magnetic type things that are happening, that like plastic has like a specific magnetic charge, and like special magnets might be able to like attract it out of the water and things like that. Like there's really cool things that people are coming up with to try to figure this out. So yeah, great question. And here, I'll stop share at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we also have a few questions
Yeah.
so far. So someone asked, how do I get rid of plastic waste in my school?
That is a good question. I think the place to start is by talking to your teachers and your administration at your school. There needs to be some type of a system in place for that. I'm guessing you probably, with that question, you may not have any type of a recycling system going on at your school. And this is why the reduce reuse is so much more important than recycle, because if you can just like not even get to the point you have to worry about recycling, then that's great. So so first off, reduce. Maybe there's a way your school can find alternatives to plastics, to single-use plastics, to use in the first place. Otherwise, there's reusable items, that might be able to be used instead. Otherwise, the first step is just kind of bringing it up as a concern. And if this is a school in Pinellas County, feel free to give them or reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to, to try to set up just a chance to talk with the administration at your school, and just, let them know and see what we can do to, if anything, to be able to help with that.
Yeah. So you said how if there's a school in Pinellas County, what about schools elsewhere? What about people living in the middle of the United States, not near
Wow,
any
good
beaches?
question.
How is their waste affecting the ocean, and what can they do about it?
Sure. Well, yeah. So basically, if you're not in Pinellas County and you have this issue in your schools, so Keep Pinellas Beautiful is just the local affiliate of Keep America Beautiful here in Pinellas County, Florida. If you're in the United States, basically, there's about 700 affiliates of Keep America Beautiful across the country. So you can actually look up your own local Keep America Beautiful affiliate and reach out to them with your concerns. And there's great people who work at these affiliates across the whole country. So feel free to reach out to them and see what they can do to help, for sure. What was the other part of the question?
What is the effects that plastics coming from those areas have? Do they still travel to the ocean even if they're nowhere near
Everything goes to the
beaches?
ocean. Everything goes to the ocean. Yep. Eventually, it takes longer, but everything eventually makes its way from wherever you are in the world out to the ocean. We all live in a watershed, and the watershed you live in connects to a bigger watershed, and that watershed connects to a bigger watershed. Everything travels. No litter just stays in place. Everything eventually makes its way out to the ocean. So even if you live like in the Midwest, wherever it is, your litter will, if no one touches it after it's been littered, it will work its way eventually out to the oceans. It just takes time.
All right. Let's see. We have a few more questions.
Okay.
What might happen if we don't stop marine pollution?
Well, I want to say, before I answer this, I feel like as a society, we're slowly starting to move in the right direction. I feel like this is a bigger issue that is now more on people's minds and, more on the tip of their tongue and ready to talk about. I know there's a lot of communities around the world that are setting up like ordinances and laws about limiting certain types of single-use plastics and things across the state or in cities or whatever it might be. So word about what needs to happen and what it's happening. It is good, but it can be going faster, is really what I want to say. I mean, if we do nothing, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good. We're going to have a lot of very sick animals and no animals, and bad for our economy. And this is an issue that something has to happen about. We can't just let it go. It's a big issue, and it starts at each of us as an individual. We all have to make the choice that littering is bad, and that there's no excuse that even if you don't see a garbage can nearby, you can hold on to your items until you see one. Just because you don't see a garbage can doesn't mean you should just leave your stuff wherever you are. Laziness is the number one reason why people litter, because they just don't want to bring their stuff with them. And we just have to sort of fight that and be like, you just got to throw out your stuff where it belongs, is number one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really liked that quote you said earlier about like, what can I do, or what is this one plastic bottle, what difference is it gonna make, says like 8 billion people. So yeah, you really got to think about what we're doing and know that we can really make a difference, and a difference together. So
Absolutely.
yeah, another question was, how can we make the most impactful change?
Most impactful change? I mean, there's a few things you can do. Honestly, get involved. If you live in Pinellas County, we'd love to have you as a volunteer. We have a volunteers program. If you are a middle or high school student, if you need community service hours, we can actually help you get those hours that you need as you participate in all of our events. Be vocal, tell your family, tell your friends what's important to you. Teach, you can, if you're really motivated about it, you can even, write a letter or call your politician's office, whoever represents your area, your congressperson, your senator, whoever it might be, and let them know that this is something that means something to you. Just use your voice, and then, set an example, be a leader in these types of things. That's really what you can do to be the most impactful.
Mm-hmm. And then let's see, during cleanups, what are some of the things you have found, and what's the most common item?
That's a great question. Well, the most common item are definitely cigarette butts. That is by far the number one littered item in the world. Each year, the estimate is somewhere between 4.5 to 5 trillion are littered around the world every year, which is a ginormous amount. So those are definitely what we find the most. But yeah, it's the small pieces. It's the small pieces, and everyone, when they do a cleanup, it feels better to pick up the big pieces, because it's like, yeah, I'm making a bigger change. Look at this big piece I found. But it's the smaller pieces that are actually hurting the environment more, it's a little counterintuitive. So we should almost be having competitions for who can pick up the most small pieces. So I mean, those definitely the most common are just going to be those smaller pieces that we find, from like plastic wrappers, cigarette butts, straws, bottle caps. A lot of plastic is what we find the most. What are some of the things one of the more interesting ones I found was a manhole cover, like a cover to a sewer that someone had sawed in half. It was perfectly a half of a manhole cover. Yeah, I don't have an explanation for that. One person said that they found a bag of chicken feet. You never know what you're going to find. It's always an adventure going out and doing a cleanup, and it's always a fun question to be like, who found the oddest item today? When you do these, because there's some weird things that people like leave behind or wash up or whatever. So yeah
I found like toothbrushes, golf balls, shoes, hats, a bunch of crazy stuff. So
and sometimes like they're actually kind of nice, and like we call those treasures. Like sometimes you find a treasure that, like, I actually found like a really nice like reusable water bottle. I cleaned it really well, just so you know, but I kept it. I mean, it was like brand new, and it was just like washed up, and it's just like, well, I'm gonna keep this. So yeah, I scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed that thing, but it's just like I got a new water bottle. So yeah.
So like after you're done doing cleanups and picking up all these objects and plastic that you found, what happens to it after you take it?
Good question. Well, honestly, what happens to it most of the time is that we just have to actually throw it out. So I know that, certain types of plastic can be recycled, but recycling is a lot harder than you might think it is. And like one of the things you can't recycle are dirty plastics. And basically all the plastic that we're finding is dirty plastic. And we just don't have the resources, the time, the money, those types of things to clean all of the litter that we're finding. So we end up bringing it to the landfill. That basically, we're lucky here in Pinellas County too. We have a waste to energy landfill, which basically means that the trash that's brought in, they actually burn, and it reduces the volume by 90%. And that energy then is actually used in the community as electricity. So it's actually kind of cool, and it just basically releases steam. So it's not really even polluting the environment, which is really kind of cool that they have that system set up. So we're lucky here in Pinellas for that kind of a thing.
Yeah. And then another question we had was, what about when you're at restaurants and they give you plastic straws? What can you do? What should you do about that?
That's a great question. And that's one thing that I hope changes is that nowadays it's more so that they'll give you your drink and then also just give you the straw. But sometimes they'll bring your drink to the table with the straw already in it. And it's just like, no, don't do that. All you can do is like, I mean, if they do that, I mean, if you're going to get a refill, you can just say, oh, when you bring it back, could you, not put a new straw in? I don't need another straw, something like that. Or if they bring you the drink and then the straw separately sewn in wrapping, just be like, and they're about to put the straw on the table, just be like, oh, no, thank you. I don't need a straw. I'll just drink out of the cup. Just being polite about it, and saying, I don't need a straw. You can politely refuse. You just be like, oh, no, thank you. I don't need a straw. I mean, if you really want to do something about it, then, I mean, you could even say, oh, I noticed that, here in the restaurant, you guys are putting straws in the drinks. What would you guys think about maybe rather than doing that, asking people if they want a straw rather than just assuming that everyone does, saying, would you like a straw with your drink?
Yeah.
Something as simple as that. Yep. It's about being polite. Don't be rude. Don't be pushy. It just, if you're friendly and polite, you're going to get a lot further than if you're like, hey, why are you doing this? Don't do that. That's bad for the environment. You're just not going to make friends that way. It's not going to go. Always be friendly whenever these things happen. Always be friendly and polite.
Well, I think we almost are out of time today, but thank you, Devin. Are there any last remarks? Any last things you'd like to say before we head off?
No, I mean, I would, if you guys do live in the area, like by all means, look us up. We'd love to have you guys at our events. We do like 1,200 events a year. So just in Pinellas County. So there's a good chance that if you're wondering if something's coming up, the answer is yes. Very likely so. But yeah, check out our website. On our website, we have all of our upcoming events, all those sorts of things, lists of all of our programming. Everything we do is free. We just love getting all of you guys involved.
Yeah, also, I know that Blue Green Connections has adopted the Edgewater Park in downtown Dunedin near the marina with Keep Pinellas Beautiful. And I believe their next cleanup is April 2nd. Yeah,
Cool.
April 2nd at from 9 to 11.
Nice.
So definitely come check that out. Check out all the cleanups that Keep Pinellas Beautiful has. They're a lot of fun to go to. Bring all your friends. And yeah, thank you so much for coming to learn.
If anyone does have any other questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, you're more than welcome to shoot me an email, and I'm more than happy to have a discussion with you, and we can I can get those questions answered.
All right. Great. Yes. Well, I hope everyone learned something today, and I hope you come back for our next webinar next month. I'm not sure who we'll be talking with yet, but we'll be talking with a really cool Hope Spot protector. So yes, come to our next one and make sure to stay tuned with Keep Pinellas Beautiful, Blue Green Connections, and the Hope Learning Youth webinars. So yes, everyone have a great day and go limit your plastic use and go clean up our environment.